They were just two little girls, shivering and barefoot, left to die in the snow. Their cries swallowed by the cold and by a world that didn't care. Their stepmother walked away, closing the door on their lives as if they were nothing. But fate had other plans. A black female billionaire driving through that same storm saw something in the darkness. Two small bodies, barely moving. What happened next would shock the world and turn a night of horror into one of the most unbelievable rescues of the decade. The wind howled through the barren forest, a storm of ice and snow that seemed to have no mercy. The sky was an endless expanse of gray, darkened by the storm's fury. For most, this would be a night to stay indoors, but for two little girls, it was a night to endure the unimaginable. Lily and Emma were twins, their bond deeper than most could understand. Their delicate hands, once warm with life, were now stiff and pale, their small bodies shivering uncontrollably as they lay on the frozen earth. The only sound was the hiss of the wind as it pushed snow into their faces, making it hard to breathe. They had been abandoned by the only person who should have cared for them, their stepmother, a woman whose cruelty had no limits. She had left them here, in the middle of nowhere, as punishment for a crime they had never committed. Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from. Leave your country name in the comments below. And if you love stories about courage, loyalty, and community, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. Lily clutched her sister's hand, her own fingers numb, her mind swimming in confusion and fear. The world seemed so distant now, as if she were watching it through a veil of frost, hearing muffled voices and distant footsteps that never seemed to come closer. Her heart beat weakly, each thud of her pulse a reminder of how fragile their lives had become. "I'm scared, Emma," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "What if we don't make it?" Emma's eyes were wide, her lips trembling as she fought to stay awake. She wanted to answer, wanted to reassure her sister, but the words seemed so far away, lost in the swirling storm. She squeezed Lily's hand tighter, trying to convey the love she could no longer speak. But the cold was more than just physical. It was a weight that pressed on their hearts, a quiet suffocation of hope. They had no food, no warmth, no chance. The world had abandoned them. Even the stars above seemed distant, their light flickering through the storm but never quite touching the ground. Suddenly, a sound cut through the relentless howling of the wind. Heavy boots crunching through the snow. Someone was coming. Lily's heart raced, her body trembling, unsure whether the figure approaching was a savior or a threat. Was it someone who would help them, or someone who would finish the job their stepmother had started? The silhouette grew clearer, but the storm made it hard to see. Was it a mirage? A hallucination born from desperation? Or was it real? The figure drew closer, their boots leaving deep impressions in the snow. The cold bite of the wind made Lily's eyes water as she struggled to sit up to see better. Then, through the blur of snow, a tall figure emerged from the shadows, stepping into the dim light of a snowbank. A woman. But not just any woman. This one was different. She moved with purpose, her long coat trailing behind her as she looked down at the twins with eyes that seemed to cut through the storm itself. For a moment, Lily thought she saw a flicker of something in the woman's eyes. Something like recognition, or maybe even compassion. But there was no time to wonder, no time to think. The woman knelt down beside them, her movements swift but gentle, her hands reaching out to check their pulses. "Stay with me." The woman's voice was calm but urgent, as if she knew time was running out. "You're not alone." Lily's vision blurred again, but this time It wasn't just from the cold. It was something else, something deeper. A quiet hope, the kind she hadn't felt in what felt like forever, began to creep in, like a distant light at the end of a dark tunnel. But even as the woman gathered them into her arms, a shiver ran through Lily. The storm had only just begun. What would happen to them now? Who was this woman? Could she really save them? And then, in the distance, there was another sound. The faintest echo of a step. A sound that didn't belong to the woman. Someone else was out there. And they weren't alone anymore. The woman's arms were warm, a stark contrast to the icy wind that still clawed at their faces. She moved quickly, as if the storm were chasing them, as if there was something far more dangerous out there, lurking in the white haze. Lily and Emma clung to her, their frozen fingers finding refuge in the folds of her coat, their breaths coming in shallow, rasping gasps. "Stay awake," the woman urged, her voice steady but with an undercurrent of urgency. "Stay with me, both of you." Lily's head lolled against the woman's chest, her body too weak to fight the sleepiness pulling at her. But she couldn't. She had to stay awake. She had to stay with Emma. Her twin sister's ragged breaths beside her were the only thing keeping her grounded. "Who are you?" Lily whispered, her voice a mere tremor against the wind. The woman didn't answer right away. She pressed forward, her steps quick and deliberate, the snow crunching beneath her boots. She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the surrounding wilderness, her expression unreadable. "I'm here to help you," the woman finally said, her tone soft yet filled with something that Lily couldn't quite place, something like a promise. But who could help them now? Lily wondered. Who could save them from a fate so cold, so cruel? The wind howled louder, as if in protest, sending snow swirling through the air in thick gusts. In the distance, there was a flash of lightning, followed by the deafening crack of thunder. The storm was getting worse. But despite the chaos around them, the woman seemed unaffected, as though she were part of the storm herself. Her strength and determination were like an anchor in the midst of the storm's fury. Lily's eyelids fluttered. The exhaustion was too much. The weight of everything she had endured finally taking its toll. She squeezed her sister's hand one last time, but it was becoming harder and harder to keep her grip on consciousness. Just as Lily's mind began to slip into the fog of sleep, she heard a noise. A low growl, distant but unmistakable. Her eyes snapped open, her heart racing. It was coming from behind them. Emma stirred, her body trembling uncontrollably. She opened her eyes briefly, and in that instant, a wave of panic swept over Lily. "They're here," Emma whispered, her voice faint, a shiver running down her spine. "They found us." Lily's stomach twisted. The growl grew louder, closer. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the storm. It was something else. Something alive. Something hunting them. The woman froze for a fraction of a second, her head turning toward the sound. Her body stiffened, and Lily could see the shift in her demeanor. No longer the calm and composed figure that had saved them from the storm, but someone suddenly alert, ready for a fight. Lily's pulse quickened. She didn't know what was out there, but she could feel the danger closing in. Was the woman here to save them? Or was she simply another piece of the puzzle they didn't understand? "I have to keep you safe," the woman muttered, her voice almost to herself as she began moving faster. "No one's going to take you." Lily didn't ask what the woman meant. She didn't want to know. She only wanted to survive. With each step, the growl grew louder, more distinct, and then it was joined by the sound of heavy, labored breathing. The woman's pace quickened, the twins bouncing lightly in her arms as she moved with a determination that defied the storm around them. The snow began to fall harder, making it nearly impossible to see. But Lily could hear it now, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, multiple footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and coming closer with every second. "Hold on to me," the woman said, her voice hardening, no longer gentle. "We need to get to shelter." Lily and Emma held on tighter, but their bodies were growing heavier, their energy slipping away. They couldn't keep this up for much longer. The snow was a wall around them, the storm a constant battle. And then, the woman's pace slowed, and Lily's heart sank. "We're almost there," the woman promised, her voice strained. But even as she spoke, there was something else. A sound in the distance, a howl that sent chills up Lily's spine. Suddenly, the woman stopped. Her body tensed, and Lily saw the flash of something dark moving at the edge of her vision. She wasn't sure if it was the storm or if it was real, but it was coming closer. The footsteps. The growls. Lily's breath caught in her throat. The woman reached into her coat and pulled out something shiny. A gun, its cold barrel gleaming under the dim light of the snowstorm. The growl grew louder, now unmistakable. It was no longer a distant threat. It was right there, behind them, and closing in with frightening speed. With one final glance over her shoulder, the woman spoke the words Lily would never forget. "Stay close, and don't make a sound." The moment the words left her lips, she spun on her heel and started running again, her steps quick and purposeful. Lily clung to her tightly, her heart pounding in her chest, Emma's trembling body pressed against hers. The snow seemed to close in around them, the howls in the distance growing closer still. In that moment, the world was no longer just the cold. It was a fight for survival. And Lily knew, no matter what happened, she would never be the same again. The wind screamed through the trees, whipping the snow into frenzied swirls as the woman pushed forward, her movements swift and decisive. The twins, weak and shivering, clung to her like lifelines, their bodies struggling to stay upright. Each step they took felt like a race against time, and Lily could sense it. The woman wasn't just running from the storm, she was running from something far worse. The footsteps, the growls, they weren't just a sound anymore. They were an impending doom. Lily could feel the weight of it pressing in on them, like a shadow that had been trailing them since the moment they were left to die in the snow. The woman's gun was a strange comfort in her hands, though Lily couldn't understand why. What was she about to face? What were they running from? The landscape around them grew more treacherous, the snow knee-deep in places, the trees looming like dark sentinels in the whiteout. The woman didn't falter. She pushed through the snowdrifts with a determination that bordered on desperation, the twins' trembling bodies her only concern now. Lily's breath was shallow, her chest aching as the cold bit into her skin. She could barely hold her eyes open, but she forced herself to stay alert. Emma was silent beside her, her fragile body pressing into the woman's side, her face pale and drawn, but alive. Then in the distance, Lily saw it. A faint glow, just a flicker of light, barely visible through the snowstorm. "Hold on," the woman said, her voice low but fierce. "We're almost there." Lily's heart leaped. Could it be safety? Shelter? A warm fire? Or was it a trap? As they neared the light, the sound of growling grew louder, the air crackling with an eerie tension. Something was closing in on them. Fast. Lily could feel it in her bones, a gut-wrenching terror she had no words for. The woman quickened her pace again, and Lily's legs burned from the effort of holding on. The light grew brighter, but the growls were no longer behind them. They were all around them. Suddenly, there was a sharp crack in the air, a sound like breaking wood, and a massive shape leapt from the shadows. A creature. It was huge, its eyes glowing yellow, its claws long and sharp, gleaming in the dim light. It had the body of a wolf, but its movements were too calculated, too sinister. It was no ordinary predator. It was hunting them. Lily screamed, but the woman's grip on her tightened, her movements still calm, almost methodical. "Stay close," she hissed. "Don't let go." The woman's gun was raised instantly, her finger on the trigger, but the creature was already moving, circling them like a predator, its eyes never leaving the twins. Another growl, louder this time, came from behind them, and Lily turned to see more shadows emerging from the snow. There were more of them. Wolves, but not wolves. Creatures that had no place in this world. The woman fired once, the shot ringing out through the air, but the beast seemed unaffected. It lunged, its powerful body knocking the woman back, but she didn't fall. Instead, she twisted, her body moving with the grace of someone who had fought before. Another shot rang out, and the creature yelped, but it didn't retreat. It circled them again, its hunger palpable in the air. "Run!" the woman shouted, and Lily didn't need to be told twice. With her heart pounding, she clung to Emma, pulling her sister forward as they sprinted toward the faint light in the distance. The creatures gave chase, their growls reverberating through the cold, their heavy paws pounding against the snow. The woman stayed behind, firing at them, but it was clear that the fight wasn't just with the beasts. It was with the very elements themselves. Lily's legs felt like lead, her breath coming in ragged gasps. But they had no choice. The light was close. She could almost see the outline of a building now, the soft glow spilling out from the door. But would they make it? Could they outrun these monsters? Another creature lunged at them, its teeth bared, but the woman shot it down, the bullet embedding in its skull with a sickening thud. But that was just one. The others were still there, circling, closing in. Lily turned back to see the woman, her face a mask of fierce determination. She was shooting, reloading, and shooting again, never stopping, never faltering. "Almost there!" the woman shouted, her voice gritted through the cold. "Stay with me." The twins were almost to the door now, the warmth of the light seeming so close, so far away. All at once, the woman was right behind them, but the creatures were gaining. A loud crash sounded from behind, and Lily felt the air shift. Something massive had leapt. But just as the last creature was about to strike, the door in front of them flew open. A tall figure stood in the doorway. A man, dressed in dark clothing, his face hidden in shadow. He stepped forward, his eyes scanning the creatures with a cold, calculating expression. "Get inside," he ordered, his voice low and firm. The woman didn't hesitate. She pushed the twins forward, and they stumbled inside, the warmth of the building immediately wrapping around them like a protective shield. But they couldn't rest yet. They weren't safe. Not yet. The door slammed shut behind them, the sound of growling and scratching muffled against the heavy wood. The man locked the door with a swift motion and turned to face them. "Stay here," he said, his voice urgent. "I'll take care of this." Lily clung to Emma, her heart still racing in her chest. The warmth was starting to seep into her bones, but her mind was still a whirl of fear and confusion. Who was this man? Who was the woman who had saved them? But before she could voice her questions, the man turned and disappeared into the shadows, his footsteps quick and sure, his movements efficient. And Lily was left with only one thought. They weren't alone anymore. But who could they trust in this strange new world? The door closed with a heavy thud, sealing the twins and the woman inside what appeared to be a large cabin, its interior warmly lit and a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. The walls were made of dark wood, the air thick with the scent of burning logs, and the warmth radiated from a massive stone fireplace that crackled softly in the corner. Lily and Emma huddled together, their bodies still trembling, their teeth chattering. They hadn't felt warmth in what seemed like forever. The cold had seeped into their bones, but now the heat felt almost foreign, like something they weren't sure how to accept. They had been through so much, and yet the danger was far from over. The woman who had saved them, who had carried them through the storm, was now standing by the window, her face tense, her gaze fixed on the storm outside. She didn't speak, but her posture said everything. She was waiting for something, watching for something. The twins could feel the weight of her presence, the unspoken fear that lingered between them. The man who had let them in was standing near the door, his back to them, seemingly lost in thought. His face remained hidden in shadow, his features sharp, his movements deliberate. Every part of him radiated power and control, as if he was used to being the one in charge, the one who could protect them from whatever was outside. But who was he? And why was he helping them? "Are we safe here?" Lily's voice was small, shaky, as she clutched Emma tighter. She couldn't stop shaking. She wasn't sure if it was the cold or the fear that had followed them into the cabin. The woman turned, slowly, her gaze softening for a moment as she looked at the twins. She knelt down, her dark eyes locking with Lily's, and for the first time, there was a flicker of warmth in her gaze. "You're safe for now," she said, her voice a comforting contrast to the harshness of the storm. "But we have to stay vigilant. They won't stop coming." Lily's heart skipped. The "they" the woman spoke of. Was it the creatures? The wolves? Or something worse? "What do you mean?" Emma's voice was weak but filled with curiosity. She looked up at the woman, her wide eyes filled with a mix of fear and confusion. The woman's expression hardened again, and she stood up, her gaze returning to the window. "There are things in this world far darker than what you can imagine, and you're caught in the middle of it. This is just the beginning." Lily felt a chill run down her spine. She glanced at Emma, her sister's face just as pale and uncertain as her own. "We didn't mean to be here," Lily said softly, her voice cracking with the weight of everything they had been through. "We didn't ask for this." The woman's lips pressed together, and for a brief moment her eyes softened as she looked at them again. No one ever does. But sometimes, fate has a way of throwing you into situations you can't control. And the only way to survive is to fight. Lily nodded slowly, absorbing her words, but there was still one question lingering at the back of her mind. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman hesitated for a moment, then glanced over at the man near the door. He was still watching them. But now there was something different in his gaze. Something calculating, almost cold. He didn't speak, but his presence seemed to fill the room, heavy and unyielding. The woman sighed. "You can call me Mariah," she said, her voice softer now, as though the name carried some kind of weight. "I'm here because I need to be. I was looking for you." Lily blinked. "You were looking for us?" Mariah nodded. "Yes. I knew you'd end up here, eventually. I just didn't think it would be under these circumstances." Emma stirred in Lily's arms, her soft voice barely audible. "But how did you know about us?" Mariah turned to face them, her eyes narrowing slightly, as though weighing whether to tell them the truth. "There are people who know things about you, about your family, and there are people who will do anything to make sure you never find out the truth." Lily's head swam with confusion. "What truth?" she asked, her voice trembling. Mariah didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked over to the fireplace, her movements calm and deliberate, as if she were still preparing herself to face whatever came next. The man by the door finally spoke, his voice low, almost gravelly. "There's no time for explanations," he said. "We need to move, now." Mariah glanced at him, then at the twins, her expression hardening once again. "He's right, they'll be here soon, and we need to leave before they find us." Lily's heart pounded in her chest. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," Mariah answered quickly, "but we don't have much time." Before Lily could ask more questions, there was a loud crash from outside the cabin. A shudder ran through the walls, and a distant howl echoed in the night, a reminder of the monsters lurking just beyond their door. The man by the door turned to them, his face finally visible in the light. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp features and an aura of authority that sent a chill through Lily. His eyes were dark, intense, with a look that made her feel like he could see through her, like he knew everything, and yet nothing at all. "We move now," he said, his voice commanding. "Mariah, get the twins. We need to move fast." Mariah moved toward the door without a word, her face set in a grim determination. She reached out to take Lily's hand, her grip firm, but not unkind. "Stay close," she instructed. "We can't afford to lose any more time." Lily looked at Emma, who was still clutching her arm, and nodded. She wasn't sure what was happening, but the storm outside and the monsters chasing them were more than enough to make her trust the woman who had saved them. For now, that was all that mattered. They stepped toward the door, and Lily felt the cold air rush in, sharp and biting. Mariah led the way, followed by the man, who glanced over his shoulder to make sure they were close. As they stepped into the storm, the growls of the creatures grew louder, and the wind seemed to howl in warning. Lily's heart raced. She didn't know where they were going or who these people were, but she knew one thing for sure: the storm was far from over. The snow hit Lily's face like icy needles, the biting cold seeping into her skin as they stumbled forward into the night. The storm was relentless, a swirling sea of white that obscured everything around them. Lily could barely see anything in the blinding flurry, her hands numb as she clung to Emma, who was gripping her arm with all the strength she could muster. Mariah moved ahead of them, her silhouette barely visible in the thick snow, but her pace unrelenting. The man, tall and imposing, brought up the rear, his eyes constantly scanning the darkness behind them. Lily couldn't hear the growls anymore, but the cold dread in the pit of her stomach told her they weren't safe. Not yet. "Keep moving," Mariah's voice came through the storm, low but urgent. "We can't stop until we reach the cabin." Lily didn't ask where the cabin was, or how far they had to go. She didn't need to. Her legs were already starting to ache from the effort, the deep snow slowing their pace. But they couldn't stop. They couldn't afford to. The wind howled louder, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of danger. Lily could feel it in the air, an electric tension that made every hair on her body stand up. Something was out there, watching them, waiting. Emma's grip on Lily tightened, her voice barely audible above the wind. "Lily, I'm scared." Lily squeezed her sister's hand tightly, her own heart pounding in her chest. "I know, Emma. I'm scared too. But we have to be brave. Just a little longer, okay?" Emma nodded, but Lily could hear the fear in her sister's breath, the tremor in her voice. They were both terrified. They had been abandoned, left to die, and now they were being hunted. By what, Lily didn't know. But the fear was real, and it was all around them. They pushed on, the storm now deafening in its intensity. The wind biting at their exposed skin, the snow so thick that it felt like they were walking through a white abyss. The cabin Mariah spoke of seemed like a distant dream, a hope that was fading with every step. Lily's legs gave out, the cold and exhaustion taking their toll, and she fell to her knees, gasping for breath. She could barely see through the thick, swirling snow. It was too much. She was too tired. Too cold. "Lily!" Emma cried, but her voice was swallowed by the storm. Mariah turned around, her face set in grim determination, her eyes hard with purpose. "Get up, Lily. We can't stop now. We're almost there. Just a little longer." Lily tried to push herself up, but her muscles were too weak. The cold had drained everything from her. She wanted to say something, to reassure her sister, but the words were caught in her throat. The wind had stolen her voice. And then, a new sound broke through the blizzard. It was faint at first, but growing louder. A low growl, a rumbling that made the hairs on the back of Lily's neck stand on end. Lily's heart skipped a beat. It was back. She looked around frantically, her mind spinning, but she could see nothing. The snowstorm had consumed the world around them. There was no shelter, no safety, only the crushing cold and the sound of something stalking them. Mariah's expression didn't falter. She stepped toward Lily, offering her hand. "We have to move. They're coming." Lily grasped her hand with all the strength she could muster, the force of her grip surprising even herself. She didn't know where they were going, or how they would survive this. But she had no choice but to keep going. They all did. The growl grew louder, closer. Lily could feel the air shift, a presence on the edge of the storm that sent a shiver of terror through her. Something was out there, something that wasn't human, and it wasn't alone. "Go!" Mariah barked. They ran, or rather, they stumbled forward as fast as their tired, frozen legs could carry them. Lily could hear Emma's panicked breath behind her, could feel the fear in her sister's every step. And then, suddenly, there it was. The faint outline of the cabin ahead. A glimmer of light. A sign of hope. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Another growl, this one much closer. The air shifted again, and Lily could feel the presence drawing near. It was too fast, too close. They weren't going to make it. Mariah turned to the man behind them, her face hardening. "We need to slow them down. Now." The man didn't hesitate. Without a word, he dropped to one knee, pulling something from his coat. A flare gun. He aimed it into the sky, and with a loud crack, a burst of bright red light erupted into the air. It illuminated the storm for a brief, blinding moment. For a split second, Lily could see the creatures. They were massive. More than just wolves now. Their eyes glowed like embers, their fur matted with snow, their claws scraping against the ice as they closed in. They were fast, predatory, and relentless. And they were hungry. "Move!" the man shouted, his voice booming over the storm. They ran, faster now, with the creatures right behind them, the growls now deafening. But the light from the flare gun had slowed the beasts, pushing them back for a moment, just enough time to make it to the door. Mariah reached the cabin first, pulling the door open with a strength that seemed unnatural. She shoved the twins inside, followed quickly by the man, who slammed the door shut behind them. Inside the cabin, the warmth hit them like a wave, but it did little to calm the pounding in Lily's chest. They were safe for now, but the creatures were still out there, and they weren't going to stop. The man turned to them, his eyes dark and unreadable. "We need to fortify this place," he said quickly. "Lock everything down." Mariah was already moving, her eyes scanning the room. She grabbed a heavy piece of wood from the corner and began to push it against the door. Lily, panting and shivering, watched in awe. Who were these people? What was happening? The man looked back at her, his expression unreadable. "You're safe for now, but you need to understand something. This isn't over." Lily nodded, her mind spinning. She didn't know what was coming next. But one thing was clear. The monsters were still out there. and the storm was just the beginning. The crackling fire in the hearth cast flickering shadows across the room, the only source of warmth in the otherwise stark cabin. Lily, Emma, and the woman, Mariah, sat huddled near the fire, their bodies shivering from the cold that still clung to their bones. The man, whose name neither of the girls had learned, stood near the door, watching over them with cold, calculating eyes. His presence filled the space with an almost oppressive weight, as if he were constantly on alert for danger. Lily's mind was a storm of confusion, her thoughts fragmented by everything that had happened in the past hours. The brutal cold, the creatures, and now this cabin filled with strangers who claimed to be keeping them safe. But safe from what? Who were these people? Why had they come for the twins, and why were they now running for their lives? The fire crackled and popped, the only sound in the cabin except for the heavy breathing of the twins. Emma clutched Lily's hand, her grip weak but desperate, as if she were afraid to let go. Lily squeezed her sister's hand in return, her heart aching. They had been through so much, and yet the worst was far from over. Mariah broke the silence, her voice low and steady. "They'll come for us again. They always do." Lily turned to her, her eyes wide with fear. "Who will?" "The creatures," Mariah said flatly. "The ones hunting you. They aren't just wolves. There's something else. Something far worse." Lily's stomach tightened at the mention of the beasts. She had seen their eyes, glowing like fiery embers in the storm, their massive forms cutting through the blizzard like shadows. They were unlike anything she had ever seen, and the thought of them out there, waiting for them, made her heart race. "But why?" Emma's voice was weak, and Lily could hear the tremor in it. "Why are they hunting us? What did we do?" Mariah sighed, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the room. She moved closer to the fire, pulling the twins' attention toward her. "It's not about what you did," she said quietly. "It's about what you are." Lily's brow furrowed. "What we are?" Mariah nodded. "You're special. You and Emma. There's something inside of you, something they want, and they won't stop until they have it." Lily's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? What's inside us?" Mariah didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned her gaze toward the man near the door, who was now watching them intently. She seemed to be weighing something in her mind, deciding whether to tell them the truth. Finally, she spoke. "You're part of something much bigger than you realize, something that has been going on for centuries. There are forces at work in this world that most people can't even begin to understand, and the creatures, they are part of that." Lily's head spun. She wanted to understand, to make sense of all of this, but the words weren't coming together in a way that made sense. They were part of something bigger? What did that even mean? The man at the door spoke up, his voice low and gravelly. "The creatures are only one part of the problem. There are others. People. People who want you dead." Lily's pulse quickened. "Who? Why?" "Because you're a threat," the man said, stepping forward. "You have abilities, powers that could change the world." Lily's eyes widened. "Powers? But we're just regular girls. We don't have powers." Mariah shook her head. "You don't realize it yet, but you do. And they've been tracking you for a long time. They want to control you, use you for something that could tip the balance of everything." Lily's mind reeled. She looked at Emma, her twin sister's face pale with fear. Neither of them had ever known anything about powers, about being special. They were just ordinary girls, thrown into a cruel world that seemed determined to destroy them. The man's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening as he spoke again. "This isn't a game. These people are powerful, dangerous. They don't care about you or what you want. They only care about what you can do." Mariah turned to the man, her expression hardening. "We need to leave, now. The storm outside is only going to get worse, and the creatures won't wait forever." Lily's heart pounded in her chest. "Where will we go?" she asked, her voice small, almost desperate. "How do we escape them?" Mariah glanced at the man, then back at the twins. "We have a place, a safe house, far from here. But we have to move quickly. We can't stay in one place for too long." The man nodded. "We leave before dawn. We need to stay ahead of them." Lily's mind raced as she tried to process everything she had just heard. Powers? People hunting them for what they could do? It was too much. She didn't know what was happening, or why it was happening to them, but one thing was certain. They couldn't stay here. They had to keep moving. Emma's voice broke through her thoughts. "What will happen to us? Where will we go?" Mariah's face softened, and for a moment there was a flicker of something. Maybe hope. Maybe regret. "I don't know. But I'll keep you safe. I promise." Lily didn't know if she believed her. She wanted to. But there was so much fear, so much uncertainty in the air. How could they escape the creatures? How could they survive when everything seemed stacked against them? The man stepped forward again, his eyes focused on the storm outside. "We don't have much time," he said, his voice commanding. "Get what you need. We leave in the morning." Mariah moved to the fire and began packing supplies, blankets, food, and a few weapons, into a bag. Lily could see the urgency in her every movement. The storm outside wasn't just a natural disaster. It was a warning. Lily could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. But there was no time to question. No time to ask for answers. They had to keep moving. Whatever was out there. The creatures. The people who wanted them dead. They wouldn't wait. As the fire flickered, Lily looked out the window into the storm. The dark, swirling snow seemed to swallow the world. And for a moment, she wondered if they would ever make it out alive. But she couldn't stop now. She couldn't stop fighting. The following hours passed in a blur. The fire crackled in the hearth. But its warmth did little to ease the chill in Lily's heart. The storm outside had not let up, its fury only intensifying as the night wore on. Mariah and the man worked in silence, preparing for the journey ahead, while the twins tried to gather their scattered thoughts, their minds still reeling from the revelations. Lily's thoughts kept drifting back to the same question. What did they want with her and Emma? Why were they special? They were just ordinary girls. Or were they? She caught a glimpse of Emma, sitting by the fire, her pale face drawn with exhaustion. She was trying to hold it together, but Lily could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear that mirrored her own. They had been through so much already, and yet the worst was still ahead. "We need to move," the man said suddenly, his voice low and urgent. His eyes were scanning the storm outside, his expression unreadable. Lily looked up. He was already dressed, his coat and gear packed, ready for the journey. Mariah was beside him, pulling on her gloves and checking the weapons that were now secured to her belt. "Is everything ready?" Mariah asked, her voice firm and commanding. The man nodded. "We leave now. We don't have much time before the creatures find us again." Lily's heart skipped a beat. What if they're already here? "They're not," the man said, his voice tight. "But we have to move quickly. The longer we stay here, the more danger we're in." Lily swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. She had no choice but to trust these strangers. They were her only hope. The storm, the creatures, everything out there was a nightmare, but at least in here, there was a small chance of survival. Mariah turned to the twins. "You both need to get ready. We leave in 10 minutes. Lily stood up, her legs stiff from sitting too long. She looked at Emma, who was slowly rising to her feet as well. Her sister's face was pale, but there was determination in her eyes. The same determination that Lily saw in herself. They would survive this. They had to. The cabin door was already packed with supplies. Blankets, food, some tools, and the weapons the man had brought along. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get them through the next stretch of the journey. Mariah handed Lily a thick coat, one much larger than she needed, but it would protect her from the cold. She slipped it on, the weight of it grounding her as she turned to Emma. "Are you okay?" Lily asked softly. Emma nodded, though her eyes betrayed her. She was just as scared as Lily. The storm outside, the unknown threats, the mystery of why they were being hunted. It was all too much. But Emma wasn't the type to give up, neither was Lily. "I'm scared," Emma admitted in a hushed voice, her hands trembling as she tucked them into the sleeves of her coat. "But I'm not going to let it stop me. We have to get through this together." Lily smiled at her sister, trying to reassure her, though she didn't feel any less afraid herself. "We will. Together." Mariah stood near the door, her eyes scanning the storm one last time. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice steady but urgent. Lily nodded, though her heart was racing in her chest. "I think so." "Good," Mariah said. She opened the door slowly, the wind howling as it rushed into the cabin. The temperature dropped even further, and Lily could feel the icy sting in the air as she stepped into the snow. The blizzard was even worse now. The wind whipped the snow into a blinding haze, and the landscape was almost completely obscured. There was no way to tell where the path lay, no way to see more than a few feet ahead. The storm had become a thick, suffocating wall that seemed determined to swallow everything in its path. Lily could barely hear the sound of her own breathing over the wind, but she could sense the danger in the air. Something was out there. She couldn't explain it, but the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. It was like the storm itself was alive, pushing them forward, forcing them into a fate they didn't understand. "We move fast," the man said, his voice steady but strained. "No stopping. Stay close, and don't look back." Lily nodded, her hand reaching for Emma's. The twins stuck close to Mariah as they walked, the man leading the way, his silhouette barely visible in the swirling snow. They didn't speak. There was nothing to say. The silence between them was heavy, thick with fear and uncertainty. Every step felt like a step closer to the unknown. The journey was slow. The snow was deep, and each step seemed to take longer than the last. Lily's legs burned with the effort, and the cold bit into her skin. But she kept moving, kept pushing forward. Every now and then she could hear the growls in the distance, faint at first, but growing louder as they continued. Lily looked ahead, her eyes straining to see past the wall of snow. But it was no use. There was nothing but white. The world had been reduced to a frozen wasteland, and in it, they were tiny, fragile specks, fighting against forces they didn't understand. Another growl echoed through the storm, this time much closer. The creatures were near. Lily's heart slammed in her chest as she turned to Mariah, her voice frantic. "We're not going to make it, are we? They're going to catch us." Mariah's face was set in grim determination as she glanced back at them. "We will. Just stay close. We're almost there." Lily didn't understand what that meant. Almost where? But she didn't have time to ask. She felt a sudden rush of wind, followed by the unmistakable sound of claws scraping against the ice. The growl came again, this time right behind them. Mariah's hand shot out, grabbing Lily's arm and pulling her forward. "Run!" Lily's heart leaped into her throat as she grabbed Emma's hand, pulling her along. The man was already ahead, his movements fast and precise, as though he had known the creatures would come for them. But what could they do? How could they outrun something that had the speed and strength of monsters? The growls were closer now, too close. The wind howled louder, the snow swirling in their faces, and Lily could barely breathe. She could hear Emma's panicked gasps behind her, and all she could do was push forward. The creatures were right on their heels. The wind whipped at Lily's face, biting into her skin, but she barely felt it. Her legs were burning. Every muscle in her body screamed for relief, yet she couldn't stop. Emma's hand was clutched tightly in hers, the only thing that grounded her as the storm raged on around them. The creature's growls grew louder, more urgent, and Lily could feel the terror seeping into her bones. Mariah led the way, her strides long and powerful, her figure cutting through the snow like a shadow. The man, ever the protector, kept pace, his eyes constantly scanning the darkness for any sign of the creatures. Lily didn't know how much longer they could keep running. The storm, the monsters, the exhaustion. It was too much. Ahead of them, a flicker of light appeared in the storm, so faint it might have been a mirage. Mariah's pace quickened, and the man gave a sharp nod. "Keep moving," he urged, his voice laced with tension. "The safe house is just ahead." But Lily wasn't sure she believed him. The creatures were too close. The howls were deafening now, a constant, terrifying reminder of the death that was chasing them. Suddenly there was a flash of movement in the snow, so fast that Lily could barely register it before it was upon them. The man drew a weapon, a long silver blade, but the creature was quicker. It lunged, its glowing eyes fixed on Lily and Emma. The man was on it in an instant, slashing out with a brutal, practiced motion. The creature howled, recoiling, but it wasn't deterred. More growls echoed from the storm. More of them, and they were closing in fast. Mariah's voice was a whip-crack of urgency. "Run!" Lily's heart thundered in her chest as she yanked Emma forward, pulling her sister along as they surged ahead. But the snow was deep, the storm blinding, and the cold had settled into their bones. Every step felt like it could be their last. A scream split the air, distant but chilling, and Lily's stomach twisted. Was it one of the creatures, or one of the people helping them? She didn't know, but she couldn't stop to check. She couldn't look back. Another sharp command from the man. "Go!" The safe house. They were almost there, but every instinct in Lily screamed that they wouldn't make it in time. The growls were deafening now, the creature's claws scraping against the frozen earth behind them. The wind howled in their ears, drowning out everything else as they pushed through the snow, their breath visible in the frigid air. And then, out of nowhere, there it was, a shape through the blizzard. A cabin. The safe house. It wasn't much, but it was shelter, and it was the only thing standing between them and whatever was hunting them. Mariah reached the door first, her hand slamming against the wood as she kicked it open. "Inside, now!" she shouted. Lily's lungs burned, her legs weak, but she didn't stop. She didn't have the luxury. She forced herself to keep running, to keep moving, until the door was in front of her. She didn't hesitate. She shoved through the door, pulling Emma in behind her. Just as the wind howled one final time, louder than before, the door slammed shut with a violent thud. They were inside. Safe. For the moment. The cabin was small, dimly lit by a few lanterns, but it felt like the most comforting place Lily had ever been. The fire crackled in the corner, its warmth almost unbearable after the storm. But they were safe, at least for now. Mariah moved quickly, securing the door, and the man stood at the window, his eyes scanning the storm outside, never letting down his guard. Lily collapsed to the floor, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Emma was beside her, her eyes wide with fear, but the tension was slowly beginning to fade. They were safe. They had made it. But the creatures were still out there, and Lily could feel it in her bones. The danger wasn't over. Mariah knelt beside them, her face grim. "You're safe here for now," she said, her voice low and steady. "But this is only temporary. They'll keep coming. They won't stop." Lily's head swam with exhaustion, her eyes heavy, but she forced herself to focus on Mariah's words. "Why are they hunting us?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mariah's gaze softened, but there was something else in her eyes, something deeper. "Because you're special," she said, her voice laced with sorrow. "You have abilities, things you don't even understand yet, and those who are hunting you want to control that power. They'll stop at nothing to get it." Lily's stomach twisted. "What kind of power?" "I can't explain it all right now," Mariah said, her voice tight. "But they're coming for you. For both of you." Lily's heart pounded. "Who are they?" The man turned from the window, his expression cold and unreadable. "They are a shadow organization, one that has existed for centuries. They have the means to track you, to control you, and they will not stop until they do." Lily felt the weight of his words like a physical blow. They were being hunted by something ancient, something vast, and they were caught in the middle of it all. A cold shiver ran down Lily's spine. They weren't just fighting for their lives anymore. They were fighting for their very freedom. "We can't stay here forever," Mariah said, her voice hardening with resolve. "The storm will pass soon, but they won't. We need to prepare for what's next." Lily closed her eyes, trying to steady her thoughts. She had no idea what the future held, no idea how they would survive. But for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could. "Whatever happens," Lily said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides, "we'll fight. Together." Mariah's eyes flickered with a brief, approving glance. Together. And with that, the door to the unknown was slowly closing behind them.